They called him a useless old man. Right there, in front of 200 people, champagne glasses in hand, flowers on every table, string lights burning gold above a rooftop in Beverly Hills, and a son-in-law in a custom suit standing at the center of it all, grinning like he had already won. And his own daughter, his blood, his heart, the little girl he once carried on his shoulders through the streets of Houston, said nothing. Nothing. Now.
Have you ever worked quietly for 30 years, building something real, only to have the people closest to you look through you like you were glass? Like all those years meant absolutely nothing? Because that is exactly where we are. And here is what nobody in that room knew. The man they were laughing at wasn't broken. He wasn't even angry. He was watching, counting, and he had already decided that every single one of them would remember this night for the rest of their lives. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything.
Aldrich Beaumont had not asked for a party. He had not asked for the rooftop venue, had not asked for the caterers, or the four-piece jazz ensemble playing something smooth and expensive in the corner, or the guest list that ran 2 pages long. He had certainly not asked to be flown from Houston to Beverly Hills on a Friday evening with 48 hours' notice and told to dress nicely because his daughter Vivian was announcing her engagement. He came because she asked him to. That was the only reason. Aldrich was 61 years old. He had a quiet face, the kind that held more than it showed, dark eyes that noticed everything, and hands that still carried the roughness of a man who had built things with them. He walked into that party in a dark navy suit that was clean and pressed and 10 years old, and he did not apologize for that. He was not there to impress anyone. He was there for Vivian. She spotted him the moment he stepped off the elevator. She was standing near the bar in a red dress, her hair pinned up the way her mother used to wear hers, and for just a second, just one, her face did something soft and real, like relief, like a girl who still needed her father even when she pretended she didn't. Then the man beside her put his hand on the small of her back, and whatever that look was, it disappeared. Rhett Calloway was 34 years old and already acted like 40 was beneath him. He had the kind of jaw that photographers loved, money that came from his father's investment firm, and a handshake that was always too firm, the kind that was less of a greeting and more of a measurement. He had met Vivian 2 years ago at a charity gala in Dallas and pursued her the way men like him pursued things they wanted to own. He crossed the rooftop to meet Aldrich with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Mr. Beaumont." He said it the way someone says a name they find slightly amusing. "Glad you could make it." Aldrich shook his hand, said nothing extra. "This is something, isn't it?" Rhett gestured at the rooftop, the city lights below, the laughter rising from every corner, and the waitstaff moving like choreography through the crowd. "Vivian deserves the best. I always make sure she has it." He said it with his eyes on Aldrich. Aldrich smiled. It was a small smile, the kind that knows something. "She always has," he said simply. Rhett's jaw tightened just slightly, almost nothing. Almost invisible, but Aldrich caught it. He caught everything. The engagement announcement came at 8 o'clock. Rhett took the microphone like it was made for him. He talked about Vivian the way men in his tax bracket talked about acquiring art, with admiration and ownership mixed together until you couldn't tell which was which. The crowd loved it. 200 people who all knew Rhett's name before they knew hers, laughing at his jokes, nodding at his charm, raising their glasses. Aldrich stood near the edge of the crowd and watched. And then Rhett said it. He said it like it was a joke, smooth, easy, the way dangerous things always sound the first time. "Vivian is extraordinary," Rhett said into the microphone, his voice warm and easy. "She came from humble beginnings, really humble." He paused for the laugh. "Got it. Her father is, well, let's just say he worked hard with what he had." Another pause, another laugh, softer this time, nervous. "A good man, simple man, you know the type." The room shifted. Not a lot, just enough. A few faces turned. Someone near the bar stopped mid-sip. Vivian's best friend Lourdes, who was standing 3 feet away, went very still. And Vivian looked at her father. Here is the thing about that moment that nobody talks about afterward. She looked at him with something that was not quite shame and not quite love, but lived in the terrible space between both. And she opened her mouth. She actually opened her mouth. "Rhett," He squeezed her hand. Not gentle, firm, the way you squeeze something to remind it that it belongs to you. She stopped. The crowd was watching, all 200 of them, and Vivian felt the weight of every single set of eyes. And she made a choice. She made it fast, the way people make the choices they will regret the longest. Quickly, quietly, without looking at what they are leaving behind. She turned away from her father. She let the moment pass. Rhett kept talking. The crowd kept laughing, and Aldrich Beaumont stood at the edge of it all and did the most terrifying thing a quiet man can do. He nodded. Once. Slow. To himself. Like something had just been confirmed. Later. Much later, when the party was still loud and the jazz was still playing, and Rhett was in the centre of a circle of men who all laughed at everything he said. Vivian found her father standing alone near the far railing of the rooftop. He was looking at the city. Los Angeles spread out below them like something spilled. All that light. All that distance. Dad. He didn't turn right away. Dad, I'm sorry, he didn't mean it the way it... Vivian, he said her name like a period, not angry, just firm. Don't... She stopped. The apology died in her throat. He turned then and looked at her fully, and what she saw in his face was not what she expected. No hurt, no anger, no quiet devastation, just clarity, the kind that comes after a decision has already been made. Do you love him? He asked. She blinked. What? It's a simple question. She looked back at the party, at Rhett, laughing, holding court, the centre of everything the way he always was. And you want to know the honest truth? She had to think about it. She actually had to think about whether she loved the man she had just said yes to in front of 200 people. That alone should have told her something. I do, she said finally. He's ambitious. He's driven. That's not what I asked. Silence. Aldrich looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he looked back at the city. Go back to your party, Vivian. Dad. Go. Still no anger, still that calm. I'm fine. She stood there for 3 more seconds, wanting something from him she couldn't name, needing him to be upset so she could feel less guilty maybe, or needing him to forgive her so she wouldn't have to earn it. He gave her neither. She walked back to Rhett, and Aldrich stood at the railing alone and made a phone call. 1 call, 3 words. Start phase 1. That was all. There is a particular kind of man that cities like Beverly Hills produce. The kind who grew up watching money move and learned early that the loudest person in the room controls the room. Rhett Calloway was that kind of man, and he was very good at being that kind of man. He had also learned, from watching his own father operate, that the fastest way to control a woman was to isolate her from the people who knew her before you did. So in the weeks after the engagement party, Rhett did what he always did. He got busy. The dinners got fancier, the weekends got fuller, there was a trip to Napa, another to New York for a gallery opening, a long weekend in Miami where Rhett spent most of Saturday on the phone with his business partner, Garrison Holt, while Vivian sat on a hotel balcony and watched the ocean, and tried not to think about the look on her father's face at the party. She had called Aldrich twice since Beverly Hills. Both times he answered on the second ring. Both times he said he was fine, and both times there was something in his voice she could not identify. A patience that felt almost like waiting, and it unsettled her in a way she pushed down and did not examine. Meanwhile, in Houston, Aldrich Beaumont was not fine. He was working. This is what you need to understand about Aldrich. He had not worked hard with what he had. He had built an empire with what he had. Not a loud empire, not the kind with press releases and magazine covers, a quiet empire. Real estate across 4 states, a private equity stake in a logistics company that moved goods across the entire Gulf Coast, a holding company, Beaumont's Capital Group, that operated under 3 different names and had never once appeared in a newspaper because Aldrich had specifically designed it that way. He had a lawyer in Houston named Octavius Webb who had been with him for 22 years. He had a financial strategist named Priscilla Dade who ran numbers the way surgeons ran scalpels, clean, precise, no wasted motion. And he had a plan that had been in the back of his mind since the night he shook Rhett Calloway's hand at a family dinner in Dallas 6 months before the engagement and felt the man take his measure and find him wanting. A man who disrespects the small, Aldrich had thought that night, will destroy the great. He had decided then. He had simply been waiting for Rhett to give him a reason to begin. The rooftop in Beverly Hills had been a very good reason. The rumor started in Houston. It moved the way all real rumors move, not fast, not slow, but steady. Aldrich Beaumont is struggling. Aldrich Beaumont has made bad investments. Aldrich Beaumont's holding company is in trouble. By the time it reached Dallas, it had grown teeth. By the time it reached Garrison Holt's office in Austin, it had become Aldrich Beaumont is finished. Garrison told Rhett over lunch at a steakhouse in uptown Dallas. "Heard your future father-in-law is having a rough quarter," Garrison said, cutting his ribeye with the mild interest of a man discussing weather. Rhett looked up. "What do you mean?" "Beaumont Capital. Word is they're bleeding. Something about a bad commercial property deal in Phoenix." Rhett said nothing for a moment. Then he smiled. "And here, right here, was where you see who Rhett Calloway actually was underneath all that charm and custom tailoring. Because a decent man hearing that news would have picked up the phone and called, would have asked if the family needed anything. Rhett did none of those things. He pulled out his phone and called his attorney Devereaux and told her to quietly look into the structure of any assets that might become relevant given his upcoming marriage. He told Vivian nothing. He simply got quieter around her, cooler, the way a man gets when the thing he married for turns out to have less value than he calculated. Vivian noticed. She always noticed. She just told herself she was imagining it. Vivian drove to Houston on a Tuesday. She did not tell Rhett. She arrived at her father's house at noon. A good house, red brick set back from the street, with old oak trees that had been there since before she was born. She had grown up in that house, learned to ride a bike in that driveway. She had not been back in 14 months. That thought hit her as she turned off the car. 14 months. When had 14 months happened? She found him in the kitchen, eating lunch alone, a bowl of something simple, a glass of water, a newspaper folded open on the table beside him. He looked up when she walked in, and his face did something quiet and glad that he immediately contained. "Dad, are you okay? I heard some things about the business." He looked at her for a moment with those dark, patient eyes. "I've been worse," he said simply. "What does that mean?" "It means I've been worse." She stopped herself from finishing the sentence about Rhett's attorney, but he caught the pause. He always caught everything. His phone sat on the table. Priscilla Dade's name was not on it yet, but the plan was already 3 moves ahead. Her phone rang. Rhett's name lit up the screen. She looked at the phone, looked at her father. He said nothing, did not tell her not to answer, just waited with that patience that felt, in that moment, more like grief than peace. She picked up. "Come home. We have the caterer meeting at 4. "Rhett, I can reschedule the... Vivian, 4 o'clock. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she stood, reached for her bag. "I have to go." "I know," Aldrich said. She paused at the kitchen door, her back to him. "I'll call you," she said. "You don't have to." She left. Aldrich finished his lunch. Then he called Octavius Webb. "They're moving," Aldrich said. "How fast?" "Fast enough. His attorney is already looking." A pause. Then Octavius, 22 years and still somehow surprised, said, "Are you sure you want to let it go this far?" Aldrich looked out the kitchen window at the old oak trees. "Let them finish," he said. "Let them think they see the bottom. And then..." Aldrich set down his spoon. "Then we show them there is no bottom." Here is the thing about Rhett Calloway that Vivian did not know yet. His name was Bennett Stroud, 31, junior partner at Rhett's law firm, and he had been in 3 meetings over the past 4 months where Rhett Calloway had used Aldrich Beaumont's name in a way that made the room uncomfortable. In the first meeting, "Don't worry about any Beaumont family entanglements. The man is a liability. Came from nothing, built nothing that matters. Her connection to him is sentimental, not financial." In the second, "No real man comes from that kind of family. I keep Vivian insulated from that world for a reason." And in the third, the one Bennett Stroud would replay in his head for years, Rhett was on the phone with Garrison Holt, not knowing Bennett was still in the conference room on the other side of the glass wall, and he said, "Her father's existence gives me leverage with her. Once the assets are structured correctly, his opinion stops mattering entirely." Bennett Stroud looked down at his notes and said nothing. He would say nothing for 3 more weeks, and then he would say everything. But we are not there yet. The documents arrived on a Wednesday. They were real documents, beautifully prepared, legally coherent, and thoroughly misleading. A prenuptial agreement that was also buried in its third addendum, a quiet mechanism for the transfer of certain assets in the event of specific financial circumstances affecting either party's family. Rhett put them in front of Vivian on a Sunday evening after a dinner that had been careful and warm and softened by a good bottle of wine. Before the wedding, we should just be smart. Protect each other. Standard stuff. Vivian looked at the documents. She was a smart woman, not naive, but tired. Tired in ways she did not have words for. She picked up the pen and stopped. "I want my father to look at this." Rhett's face did not change. "Your father doesn't have the background to..." "He has Octavius Webb. I want Octavius to look at it." A pause, just barely too long. "Of course," Rhett said. "Take your time." She sent a photo to Octavius Webb that night. He called back in 11 minutes. "Where did you get this?" "Rhett, it's a prenup." A pause shaped like something Octavius was deciding whether to say. "Send me all of it. Tonight." She did. She signed nothing. Rhett said that was fine, kissed her forehead and went to bed. And Vivian sat on the couch in the dark apartment and looked at the ring on her hand and tried to remember the last time she had felt completely sure of something. She could not think of one. Lords Pemberton had been Vivian's best friend since they were 17. She was 32 now, with a quick mind and a louder mouth and the specific gift of seeing things clearly that people who love someone cannot always afford to see. She had not liked Rhett from the beginning. She had not said so. But she had watched. She drove to Dallas on a Thursday, took Vivian to a cafe on Greenville Avenue, loud, bright, good coffee, sat down across from her, and said with the directness that had held their friendship together for 15 years, "Tell me what's actually happening." And Vivian told her. The documents, the attorney, her father's house, the quiet that had moved in, the way Rhett's eyes had looked when she mentioned Octavius Webb. Lords listened. Then she said, very quietly, "Have you heard the rumours about him and Demi Hargrove?" Vivian went very still. "What rumours?" "Viv, the woman from his firm, the one at the Beverly Hills party." Lords looked at her friend, at the ring, back at her face, and she told her. Not everything, not yet, but enough. Enough that Vivian drove home in total silence and sat in the parking garage for 22 minutes before she went upstairs. Enough that when Rhett asked if she was okay, she said yes in a voice that was perfectly even and completely empty. Enough that something in Vivian Beaumont, something that had been bending for a very long time, finally, quietly cracked. And in Houston, in a red brick house under old oak trees, Aldrich Beaumont's phone lit up. A message from Priscilla Dade. "You now own 51%. Aldrich read it once. Then he called Octavius Webb. "It's time," he said. Last time they laughed at him. A Beverly Hills rooftop, 200 guests, a son-in-law with a microphone, and enough arrogance to fill the whole city. He called Aldrich Beaumont a simple man, a man who worked hard with what he had, said it like a joke, and the crowd laughed. And Aldrich Beaumont stood at the edge of that room, nodded once to himself, and made one phone call. 3 words. Start phase 1. You thought you knew where this was going. You had no idea. Octavius Webb had been a lawyer for 31 years, and in that time he had seen documents that were sloppy, documents that were brilliant, and documents that were weapons dressed in legal language. The prenuptial agreement Vivian sent him was a weapon. He sat at his desk in downtown Houston on a Monday morning with 4 pages of notes in front of him and called Priscilla Dade, who had already been awake for 2 hours running the same numbers from a different angle. "The third addendum," he said without preamble. "I know," she said. They built a trigger mechanism. If Beaumont Capital shows insolvency within 90 days of the wedding date, the prenup activates a transfer clause that moves the Phoenix holdings into a jointly held trust, which Rhett controls 51% of. So he needs the bankruptcy to be real, or to look real long enough to get her signature. A pause on the line. "How long has Aldrich known?" Priscilla asked. "Long enough," Octavius said. "He started building the shell structure 9 months ago, before the engagement was even announced." Another pause, longer. "He knew Rhett was going to do this?" "No. He knew Rhett was the kind of man who would." Priscilla Dade was quiet for a moment. In 20 years of financial strategy, she had worked with sharp people, cautious people, and brilliant people. But what Aldrich Beaumont had built over the past 9 months, quietly, without a single press release, without a single traceable meeting, was something different. It was not a defense. It was a stage. Every fake bankruptcy rumor, every document Rhett's attorney had found pointing to a struggling Beaumont Capital, every whispered conversation in Dallas and Austin about the old man's decline, all of it was choreography, carefully written, carefully placed. Every piece was designed to make Rhett Callaway feel like he was winning. Because a man who feels like he is winning stops being careful. And Rhett Callaway had stopped being very careful indeed. Bennett Stroud sat in his car in the parking garage of the law firm on a Wednesday evening and stared at his phone for 11 minutes before he dialed. He had Vivian's number from a firm directory. He had never used it. He was not sure he should use it now. He was 26 days from making partner, and this was exactly the kind of thing that could end that. Rhett Callaway had a long memory and a longer reach. He dialed anyway. She answered on the third ring, her voice careful in the way voices get when they have learned to be careful. "Miss Beaumont, my name is Bennett Stroud. I work at Devereaux and Associates. I need to tell you something, and I need you to understand that I am not doing this for any reason except that what I've heard is wrong and someone should have said something sooner." Silence on the line. Then, "I'm listening." He told her about the 3 meetings, the exact words, "Her father is a liability. No real man comes from that kind of family." And the last one, the phone call through the glass wall. "Her father's existence gives me leverage with her." He heard her breathing change. He told her about Demi Hargrove. Not rumours, but facts, dates, a hotel in Scottsdale, a dinner in Austin that Rhett had told Vivian was a client meeting. He heard her go completely silent. "Why are you telling me this?" she said finally. Her voice was very even, the kind of event that takes a lot of work. "Because you deserve to know before you sign anything." Another silence. Then, "Thank you, Bennett." She hung up, and she called her father. Not Octavius, not Lord's, her father. He answered on the second ring. "Dad." Her voice cracked, just at the edge, just barely. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "I know, baby," he said. His voice was so quiet, so steady. "I know." She started crying then, not loudly. The way you cry when you have been holding something so long your arms simply give. He let her. He did not say, "I told you so." He did not say, "I knew," which he did. He did not perform anything. He just stayed on the line, in his kitchen in Houston, and let his daughter cry. And when she was done, he said, "Come home?" She said, "I don't know if I can." He said, "You can. You always could." There was a long pause. Then she said something that would stay with Aldrich Beaumont for the rest of his life. "I chose wrong, Dad. I chose comfort when I should have chosen you. I'm so sorry." Aldrich Beaumont pressed the phone against his ear and closed his eyes. "That's the first truly brave thing you've said in a long time," he told her. "Hold on to that feeling. You're going to need it." He hung up, called Octavius immediately, moved the timeline forward 2 weeks. Octavius. The gala or the boardroom? Aldrich. Both. Rhett Callaway was, by every external measure, in the best moment of his life. The wedding was 6 weeks away. The prenup was unsigned, but Devereaux had assured him Vivian would come around. The Beaumont Capital story was spreading the way he had planned, through exactly the right rooms in Dallas and Austin and Houston. His business partners were already treating the Phoenix properties as an inevitability. Garrison Holt had started calling it the inheritance situation without even blinking. And then there was the gala. The Calloway Family Foundation held its annual charity gala every spring at the Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek in Dallas. Black tie, 400 guests, every person whose name moved money in Texas in the same room for one evening. Rhett had been hosting it for 3 years since his father stepped back, and he ran it the way he ran everything, with visible authority and invisible cruelty. This year he had added something new to the program, a business announcement. What it actually was, the moment he planned to present the transfer of Beaumont Capital's Phoenix assets as a family consolidation, with documents already drawn, waiting only for a signature from a woman who he believed was, by now, too tired and too isolated to refuse him in front of 400 people. He had underestimated her father. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated the specific, unbendable quality of a woman who has just cried on the phone with her father at midnight and woken up the next morning knowing exactly who she is again. The Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek was lit like a painting. String lights wound through old magnolias. Valets moved cars with the quiet efficiency of men who had done this 100 times. 400 people in black tie drifted through marble foyers and dark wood corridors, champagne in hand, doing the thing that rooms like this exist for, the careful, expensive performance of certainty. Rhett arrived at 7:15 with Vivian on his arm. She looked extraordinary. That is the honest truth. She wore midnight blue and she had her mother's earrings, and her chin was up in a way that Rhett read as composure, but was actually something else entirely. She had not signed the documents. She had not told him that. She had simply waited. At 7:40, Lords Pemberton arrived. She was on the official guest list. Vivian had added her 2 weeks ago without explanation. Rhett had not objected. He was not paying close enough attention anymore. That is what happens when a man decides he has already won. He stops counting the room. At 8 o'clock, Octavius Webb arrived. He was not on the guest list. He was there as a guest of the Foundation's legal counsel, a small firm that had, 3 days ago, quietly added Octavius as a consulting partner for a single project. At 8:15, Priscilla Dade arrived. She sat at a table near the back with a laptop bag and an expression of complete calm. At 8:30, Aldrich Beaumont walked through the front door of the Rosewood Mansion on Turtle Creek. He wore a black suit that was not 10 years old. He had bought it 2 weeks ago in Houston, at a shop on West Alabama, where the tailor had known him for 15 years. It fit perfectly. He looked like exactly what he was, a man who had decided tonight was the night. Nobody noticed him at first. That was the last time that would ever be true. Rhett saw Aldrich at 8:47. He was midway through a conversation with 2 senior partners from a Houston development group when he looked across the room and saw the man he had publicly humiliated on a Beverly Hills rooftop, standing at the bar holding a glass of water, speaking quietly to Octavius Webb. His first thought was, how did he get in here? His second thought, half a second later, and much colder, it doesn't matter. He excused himself and crossed the room. Garrison Holt materialized at his shoulder, the way Garrison always did when things were about to get interesting. What is he doing here? Garrison said quietly. Nothing, Rhett said. He's nothing. Move the announcement up. 9 o'clock. That's 20 minutes early. I know. He walked directly to Aldrich. They stood face to face for the first time since Beverly Hills. Aldrich looked the same as he always did. Unhurried, observant, entirely present in a way that Rhett, who was almost never entirely present, found quietly maddening. Mr. Beaumont. Same tone as always, same slightly amused measurement. I didn't realize you'd be joining us tonight. I was invited, Aldrich said simply. By whom? Does it matter? A pause. Rhett's jaw moved. Tonight isn't really the place for... For what? Aldrich asked. His voice was completely level. For family? Rhett looked at him for a moment. Then he smiled the smile he used when he wanted to communicate that a conversation was over. Enjoy the evening, he said. He walked away. Back straight, chin up, exactly as practiced. Aldrich watched him go. Then he looked at Octavius Webb and gave a single small nod. Octavius pulled out his phone. 9 o'clock. Rhett Calloway took the stage. 400 people settled. The room went from loud to quiet in the way expensive rooms do, smoothly, without resistance. He had a microphone and a screen behind him and the kind of practiced confidence that looks from a distance like authority. He talked about the foundation, about giving back, about the responsibility of those who had built something to protect it for the next generation. The room nodded. This was the language they spoke here. Then he pivoted. As many of you know, he said, I'm getting married in 6 weeks. Warm applause. He smiled. And with that comes the question every family faces. How do you protect what you've built? How do you consolidate and ensure that the future is as strong as the foundation? He looked directly at Vivian, who was seated at a table near the front. She looked back at him with an expression he could not fully read. Tonight, he said, I'm pleased to announce a family consolidation that will bring the Beaumont and Callaway interests under a unified structure, a step forward for both families and for the future we're building together. He gestured to the side of the stage. His assistant appeared with a leather portfolio, the documents inside, waiting for Vivian's signature in front of 400 witnesses. The room applauded. Vivian did not move. Rhett kept smiling. Vivian, come on up. She stayed seated. The applause faltered, just slightly, just enough. Vivian. His voice had an edge now just below the warmth. And then something happened that Rhett Callaway had not planned for. Aldrich Beaumont stood up. He did not rush. He did not raise his voice. He simply stood, in his black suit, at a table near the center of the room and said, Actually, one word, quiet. It cut through the room like something sharp. I'd like to say a few words if you'll permit me. Rhett turned to look at him. And in that moment, that exact moment, every person in that room felt it. The shift. The thing that happens when two men face each other and the room suddenly understands it has been reading the wrong one as the powerful one. This isn't the time, Rhett started. Call security if you'd like, Aldrich said, still quiet, still level. Let them witness this. Nobody moved. Rhett stood on the stage holding a microphone, and for the first time in a very long time he did not know what to do with it. Aldrich walked to the front of the room. Not to the stage. He did not need the stage. He stood on the floor, level with the audience, and that was more powerful than any platform. Priscilla Dade opened her laptop at the back of the room, a signal to the AV team, who she had briefed 2 hours ago, privately, with documents and authorization codes that had taken Rhett's team entirely by surprise when they checked the vendor credentials 20 minutes before the event. The screen behind Rhett changed. Numbers appeared. Clean, organized, precise asset holdings, ownership structures, property valuations across 4 states. The full architecture of Beaumont Capital Group, not the struggling version that had been whispering through Dallas and Austin for 6 weeks. The real one. 400 people looked at a screen showing a company worth $140 million. The room went completely silent. Aldrich spoke in that silence. Not loud. He never needed to be loud. 6 weeks ago, at an engagement party in Beverly Hills, my son-in-law called me a simple man. He said it like it was funny. He paused. I didn't correct him. I wanted to see what a man like that would do with that information. He let that sit for a moment. What he did was instruct his attorney to construct a prenuptial agreement with a mechanism inside it designed to transfer my assets to a trust he controls, contingent on a bankruptcy that I manufactured specifically so he would find it. The screen changed again. The prenuptial agreement appeared, third addendum highlighted, then next to it, side by side, Octavius Webb's legal analysis, annotated and time-stamped. The mechanism is laid bare. Rhett said, "That is confidential." "It was sent to my attorney," Aldrich said, "by my daughter. Who did you ask to sign it?" Another screen change. Emails now. Internal emails from Rhett's firm. Bennett Stroud had quietly forwarded them via a personal account to Octavius Webb 3 days ago. The words appeared in large print on the screen behind a man who still had not put down the microphone because he did not know what else to do with his hands. Her father is a liability. No real man comes from that kind of family. Her father's existence gives me leverage with her. 400 people read those words in silence. Vivian, at her table near the front, read them too. She had known they were coming. Aldrich had told her 2 nights ago on the phone what the screens would show. He had given her the choice to leave before the gala. She had said no. She had said, "I want to be there, I need to see it. And she was seeing it. She was seeing the man she had chosen over her father, rendered in his own words, on a screen in a room full of 400 people who were now very still. Lords reached across the table and took her hand. She did not pull away. Rhett Callaway tried to recover. This is important to say. He tried, because a man who has survived on charm and performance does not stop performing when the audience turns. He pivots, he deflects, he looks for the angle. These are private communications taken completely out of context, he said, into the microphone, his voice still nearly smooth. This is an ambush orchestrated by a man who is clearly struggling and looking for... The bankruptcy was fake, Aldrich said. Rhett stopped. Every rumor, every whispered conversation in Dallas and Austin, every document your attorney found pointed to a declining Beaumont capital. Fake, designed. I built them so you would find them, so you would feel safe, so you would move exactly the way you moved. The screen changed one final time. Beaumont Capital Group's actual corporate structure appeared, including a subsidiary holding company formed 9 months ago, one that held, among other things, a 49% stake in the Callaway Family Foundation's primary investment vehicle, and a controlling interest, 51%, in the development firm that was the source of 60% of Rhett Callaway's personal income. Garrison Holt, at a table near the window, stood up and left the room. He did not look back. Rhett stood on that stage and felt the thing that men like him are most afraid of, the specific, total loss of the room. Not anger from the audience, not confrontation, just the quiet removal of regard. 400 people who had laughed at his jokes and raised their glasses were now looking at him with the careful distance of people deciding how quickly to disconnect. He looked at Vivian. She looked back at him with a steadiness that was nothing like what he had expected. He had expected tears or rage or the trembling uncertainty he had learned to navigate in her. What he saw instead was something that looked, remarkably, like her father. He looked at Aldrich. Aldrich said very quietly, with the microphone still in Rhett's hand and 400 people listening, "You don't work for me." A pause. "You answer to me." The engagement was over before the gala ended. Not dramatically. There was no scene. Vivian simply stood up from her table, walked to where Rhett was standing near the edge of the stage, removed her ring, and set it on the table beside him without a word. She did not look at him when she did it. She looked at her father. Rhett's attorney, Devereaux, withdrew from the representation the following morning. The development firm issued a quiet statement to its board within 72 hours, noting a change in its ownership structure and the temporary suspension of Rhett Callaway's executive authority pending review. The review took 4 days. At the end of it, Rhett Callaway was offered a position within the building's operations division, facilities management. The offer was made in writing, formally, by a human resources director who delivered the letter with complete professional neutrality. The role was not symbolic. It was real work. The building he would manage was the same tower on Commerce Street in Dallas where he had held his corner office on the 31st floor. Same building, same elevators, same executive suite where he had once sat across from men whose respect he had spent a decade accumulating. Now he would pass them in the lobby. He would pass them every morning. Rhett Callaway could have refused. He could have walked away and started over somewhere else, in another city, with another angle and another story. That was always an option. But his father's firm had also, by that point, quietly restructured. His personal accounts were under review. His reputation in Dallas, in Austin, in Houston, in every room that mattered, had been reshaped by one evening and 400 witnesses and a screen full of his own words. He took the position. 3 weeks later, Aldrich Beaumont walked through the lobby of that building on his way to a meeting on the 31st floor. He passed Rhett Callaway near the service corridor. Rhett looked at him. Aldrich stopped walking. He looked at the man who had called him simple, who had squeezed his daughter's hand to silence her, who had built a document designed to steal from him and called it family planning, who had said through a glass wall in a conference room, "Her father's existence gives me leverage." Aldrich looked at him for a long moment. Then he said, quietly enough that only Rhett could hear, "A man is never small until he chooses to be." He walked to the elevator. He did not look back. Vivian came to Houston 3 weeks after the gala. She drove herself, arrived on a Saturday morning with no announcement, just a knock at the red brick house under the old oak trees. Aldrich opened the door, looked at her, stepped aside. She sat at the kitchen table, the same table where she had sat on a Tuesday at noon, eating nothing, leaving for a caterer meeting, choosing wrong. He made coffee, sat across from her, said nothing first, let her speak. She spoke for a long time. She talked about the Beverly Hills rooftop, about the hand squeeze, about the choice she made in that moment, the fast, quiet, terrible choice, and about every smaller version of that same choice she had made in the 2 years before it. Choosing Rhett's comfort over her own honesty. Choosing the life he built for her over the life she had actually wanted. Choosing to look away from things she saw clearly because looking away was easier than acting on what she saw. She talked about her mother, who had died when Vivian was 16, and how after that she had decided, somewhere deep and wordless, that she would never need anyone the way she had needed her mother, because needing people that much was too dangerous, and how that decision had made her very good at being needed and very bad at needing. Aldrich listened. When she was done, the coffee was cold. He said, "I raised you better than this." She looked at the table. I know you know. That's not the question." He waited until she looked up. "The question is, what you do now." "What do I do now?" "You prove it." He picked up his coffee cup. "Set it down. Not to me, to yourself. That's the only proof that matters." She nodded, slowly. "Are we okay?" she asked. Aldrich Beaumont looked at his daughter, at the woman she was and the woman she was still becoming, and the long road between where she had been and where she needed to get to. "We're working on it," he said. It was not forgiveness. It was not a closed door. It was exactly what it sounded like. A beginning. The real kind, which is always harder and slower and more expensive than the kind you imagine when you are sitting in a parking garage at midnight deciding to change. She stayed for dinner. Then she stayed the weekend. Then, over the following months, she came back more often. Not to be forgiven, to show up, to call before she came, to stay when she said she would stay. To be, slowly, the person her father had always believed she was underneath the choices she had made. And Aldrich Beaumont, in his red brick house in Houston, under his old oak trees, let her. People in Dallas still talk about that gala. Not loudly, in the careful, angled way that people in rooms like that talk about things that made them uncomfortable, with a mix of fascination and relief that comes from watching something happen to someone else. They talk about the screen, about the emails, about Garrison Holt leaving without looking back, about Vivian setting the ring on the table without a word. And they talk about Aldrich Beaumont. They talk about the way he stood in the middle of that room without a microphone and without a stage and said everything there was to say with complete calm. They talk about the suit that fit perfectly. They talk about the way he looked at his daughter and the way she looked back. They talk about a man they had been told was simple. And they remember, every single one of them, the specific quality of their own silence when the screens changed. The moment they realized that they had been in a room with something they did not recognize because it did not announce itself the way power usually does in rooms like that. Aldrich Beaumont never gave an interview about it. He never made a statement. He simply went back to Houston, back to his kitchen, back to his red brick house and his old oak trees, and continued doing exactly what he had always done. Building, watching, waiting, being, in the estimation of people who had not paid close enough attention, a simple man. They feared his silence. Only after it was too late. If we are paying attention, accountability is not a moment. It is a practice. Vivian did not earn her way back with one apology and one honest conversation. She earned it over months of showing up, being present, and doing the small things consistently. That is how trust is rebuilt. Not with grand gestures, but with ordinary reliability repeated over time. End.